that we're returning from this budget. So with that in mind, we want to try to gain some relief to our aging fleet. We have 13 cars that are over 120,000 miles. We have 22 cars that are over 100,000 miles. The question was posed to me about the vehicles that we have in the parking lot at the Sheriff's Office. In light of the capital improvement project being discontinued and cutbacks, we haven't turned vehicles in like we would normally turn them in. We've held on to every possible vehicle that we can, thinking that we may have to utilize that vehicle. So you do see a number of vehicles parked in the parking lot, but that's the extremely old vehicles, as well as due to the budget cuts, we suspect that we may lose some personnel from the school. So we didn't fill certain positions for a long period of time, and that benefited us in returning some of the revenue to the county as well. We do have the issue with the aging fleet. We suspect that that will increase our maintenance costs of the vehicles substantially if we don't get some sort of relief. We're proposing that of that $189,000, we know that last budget meeting, or the board meeting, excuse me, y'all were gracious enough to allow us to replace some communications equipment that was actually in the capital improvement project, which was $55,000. We understand that that money has to come from somewhere, and the money is very, very tight. So if you take that $55,000 out of the $189,000, plus we're cut our vehicle expense as well. I gave Pam some additional forms. We took out computer systems in the car. We are going to utilize the current radio systems that we have and just transfer them into another car, which will cut down on the cost as well, because the average car is normally $44,000, and we've got it down to $26,014. If we were able to purchase 4 cars, that would give us some relief of the 13 that are due, and it would come out to be about $104,000 and a few dollars. We were hoping that if we could get those 4 cars, it may put us a little bit better shape than we are right now. We understand that everybody has to pull together and try to make things work. That would still give the county about $30,000 to put in the rainy day fund, or if you choose fit to do that. But anything you could do to help the Sheriff's Office, I've attached a letter to my packet explaining, the situation that we're in, and it's important, the downtime that the officers have to go through when vehicles break down, the safety conditions. As you know, these police cars are not, they don't run those police cars like a normal citizen would run their car. They're subject to do higher speeds than normal, and for emergency responses. And we want to try to make our officers as safe as possible, and we know that you want to do the same, but it's very difficult with the current budget situation that we're in. So we are looking for some relief for the $55,000 dispatch center that went down during the storm from possible insurance reimbursement, which may cause us to come back again and ask for an additional car if there's enough money in that as well. So we may recoup part of that $55,000 from the insurance company, and hopefully you would consider that for an additional car, because in this budget year we were slated to get 18 cars, and that has carried over from year to year. And we're in a position where we have to have safe vehicles to respond to the citizens, and we're asking for you to consider this in light of the financial times. I know y'all have certain priorities, but we feel as the Sheriff's Office, and Sheriff Lippa definitely feels, he would be here tonight, but he had a previous engagement, that this is a capital improvement project that needs to go forward. So anything you could do to help the Sheriff's Office, we would greatly appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Major Mosier, and we certainly appreciate your presentation. And I think the board realizes that you can't go anywhere else to ask for these funds.
That's correct.
And I think the board also probably realizes that at some point, there's a lot of things in the capital improvement projects that we haven't funded because, quite frankly, it's time to be frugal with those dollars. But at the same time, I don't think we can continue as a board to let everything go too long, because we're going to be in a big trouble later on if we let too much go too long. And I think we need to make sure we keep a pulse on that. And it is important. And I don't know, Mr. Vice Chairman, you have questions of Major Mosier?
Well, Major, we haven't talked about this, but is it possible we can, I know we went from no cars at all to now we're considering 4, maybe 5. Is it at all possible we could maybe look at this a little later in the fiscal year, maybe November, December, and we can say, okay, we're almost 6 months through, we know things look better, then we can go ahead and do it?
Well, that's certainly the prerogative of the board. Unfortunately, once we find out that we get the approval for the cars, then we have to order them. The radios have to be transferred. So it will take us probably 3, 4, 5 months to get these vehicles in operational condition. So for every month that we wait, it compounds the problem that we currently have.
Okay. So you're saying that the delay, if we give you a check right now for $120,000, whatever the number was, it's going to be 3 months before you get cars?
It could be longer. It could be less. If they have them on the lot, we could get them as soon as possible, and then it would take a less period of time. But by the time you pay for the vehicle or get the vehicle delivered, then it has to go to the radio shop to have all the radios transferred from one vehicle to another, and then it has to go to the decal shop, and then that has to be decaled. It could take 2 to 3 months, maybe even 4 months to get everything in line. So.
Do I have to pay for them when you make the order? Or do I pay for them after I get delivery?
You're required to pay for the car 30 days prior to receiving it. I mean, 30 days after you receive the car. So once you receive shipment, you have 30 days to make the payment.
Is that radio change and decal change part of the 30 days? Or
No, sir, it is not.
Okay.
That's just part of our process that delays us being able to get the cars.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
All right, questions, Cecilia?
I don't have any at this point, other than I'm sort of waiting, since we're going to talk about the finances at the end of the evening, just to kind of see where we are. I'm more concerned about the dollars that we have and making sure they're there at this point. Making sure that what we think we have, we have.
And I've also supplied Mr. Chairman and the members of the board with a lease agreement that can be made, and there's some detailed information in there that if you chose to go with lease vehicles, we may be able to increase the amount of cars, but I don't know where we'll be 3 years from now, so it's very difficult to enter into a lease agreement, but I did give you that information in case you chose to look through that. So, and it's usually a 3-year lease. They don't penalize you for paying out early, but it's something that if you had that question, that information is before you.
Okay, Mr. Akers?
Major, just the prices that you show us here on the sheet that was given to us tonight, they are different than the prices we had in that board packet.
That is correct, yes, sir.
Considerably.
Yes.
I have.
If you look at the original sheet that you received, it was $44,000.
Right.
And what I have done is, that is on a capital improvement project where it includes also the radars that we have a replacement schedule for. It includes actually the computers in the cars that we have a replacement schedule for. It also includes the radios themselves. We're all faced with the narrowband compliant. We have about 8 vehicles currently that will not be narrowband compliant 2012, 2013. So replacing those radios are important to get us to the goal that we need to be narrowband compliant. Unfortunately, due to the shortage of funds, we have to look at other options. So I've removed the computers, I've removed the radars, I've removed the actual the radios themselves. We'll use the existing radios on the cars that we replace.
Okay. My thoughts is the fact that there's just absolutely some things you cannot put off. I believe that, when it comes to emergency services, I think we have to do what we can to protect that area. I think when it comes to public safety, we have to do what we can to protect that area as well. I don't know that waiting longer is going to create more funds for us to be able to do this. And one thing that I've been impressed is the fact that the Sheriff's Public Safety area this year has saved money. I mean, I don't know how they've done it. I don't know whether they've done it through just being smarter in their operations or just what they've done. But they've saved and they've returned to the county almost $200,000. So I am in support of, and what I'd like to see, if we could, is maybe purchase 3 cars at this point, and then if we get additional funds back from the insurance company, we look at maybe another 2 cars at that point when those funds come back in. It will not give him his total 8 that he's looking for, but it certainly will give him 4 or 5 or so cars this year. I do not like the idea of lease purchase. Some of us on this board have gone through lease purchase agreements in the past, and they have not necessarily been to the advantage of the county to do that. So I would not support anything that looked, smelled, or sounded like a lease purchase, to be honest with you, at this point. But again, I am in total agreement that we need to go ahead and do something for the sheriff at this point as far as vehicles are concerned. But again, I would like to see us look at maybe 3 vehicles now and 2 should we get the monies from the
And we appreciate
insurance.
any support we can get.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Popowitz?
Yes. 2 questions.
Yes, sir.
Number one, the extended warranty that you talked about in your paper. How long does that last? Is it through mileage? Is it through a year? What does that extended warranty entail?
Well, the extended warranty is for the powertrain and engine, and I believe that is covered up to 80,000 miles, 3 years, which is normally, it's either 80 or 100,000 miles. I can check on that.
Yes.
The Fords had a problem with the transmission at one point because they reduced the clutch in the transmission or something, and it got better gas mileage, but it had a tendency to lose transmissions. So we're trying to protect the county and the sheriff's office and the budget and get that extended warranty. That was not something that we felt like should be pulled from the expense of the car because it's more of a protection policy than anything else. I believe it's 80,000 miles and it's 3 years.
3 years.
Yes, sir.
Fly.
Yes, sir.
Was.
The other question.
Yes, sir.
You're saying that our vehicles now, they're over 120,000. It's costing us about $1,600 a month more to maintain. Is that right?
We did an assessment on the vehicles that we currently have. Anything over $100,000, we determined what the cost was for the vehicle for any additional repairs after it reaches 100,000 miles. It was an average about $1,600 per vehicle.
Per vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Per year or per month, or what's the?
Per vehicle, period.
Okay.
If however long it was in service after 100,000 miles.
Oh, I see. I see. So it could be a year, it could be 3 months. Just
Exactly. And it could, and a lot of the vehicles did sit in the parking lot as standbys with extreme high mileage, which really kind of took away the true meaning of what your repair costs are, because if they're not being operated due to just standing by in case we don't get any more vehicles at all, we have numerous vehicles really that we could turn in to the school board, but we just choose not to because we have to drive something. So
I understand.
we want the safest vehicles as possible. We still have to provide services to the community. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, those are my questions.
yes, sir.
Major Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board members, how would you like to proceed with the matter?
Mr. Chairman, if you take a motion, I would certainly make a motion that we approve the expenditure of purchasing 3 vehicles at this point. But again, my motion would also include that if they receive insurance fund reimbursements on the damages to the radio system, that money go toward purchasing new vehicles, whatever amount that is that we receive.
I'll second that. That seems like a fair compromise to buy now or wait. So I'll second
Thank you, sir.
that. Mr. Mosier, just so I have a Ford, and I think it's 100,000 miles normally. It might be different for police vehicles, but I
Right.
think it's 100,000.
It may be. I will check on that.
Was that,
He meant-
not to exceed 100,000, was there a dollar amount on it?
No, it was just to purchase the 3 vehicles. At
the
26,014,
Yes, sir.
26,014, yeah.
Yes, sir.
At that dollar amount.
All right, at each vehicle.
Just one question, that
Yes,
means
sir.
you're going to take 3 of those old cars and,
Yes.
okay, great.
We have to in order to get the radios out of them to put in the new cars, so hopefully it'll work out just fine. And also, if I may add, and I know this is not part of the report, but
Well,
unfortunately.
we have a motion on the floor, so why don't we take care of that,
Yes, sir.
okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, motion been made and probably second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same. Motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Gooch will no longer be
26,000.
employed with the sheriff's office. He has been appointed by the governor to be the assistant director at the Juvenile Justice Services System. So he has accepted that appointment, and he starts on August the 9th. So he will be missed, mainly by Fran, because they talk the same language.
Good luck.
He's a
But,
fine man.
Good luck.
No, we'll miss him greatly. He's been a tremendous asset, and a lot of the credit needs to go to him for the saving of the money and the funds that we've been able to return to the county, because he was very, very conscientious and frugal with the money during the budget process. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Major Moser. All right, next, we have the appointments to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We have anyone for that appointment this evening?
I didn't have anybody. I thought, Wayne, weren't you looking? Oh, Bobby.
Okay. How about the Board of Equalization?
Who was that?
We need Port Royal District.
Mr. Rizzo, I have someone pending on that, and I'll have to do it at the next board meeting.
Okay. All right, and lastly, the Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Commission, in term of Mr. Alan Parton has expired, and
Do they want him back?
I'm sure Mr. Parton served excellently and would love to return, wouldn't you? Oh, okay. Well, go ahead, Mr. Akers, I'll let you do it.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we appoint Mr. Alan Pardon to be the county representative on the Middle Peninsula Juvenile Detention Commission.
Oh, I would-
Second.
Yeah.
You talked about like he was dead.
motion made and probably second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Next, we had the consent agenda items. Board members have received in your packet the consent agenda items. Any items the board members need to pull, or motion would be in order?
Mr. Chairman, seeing no objections, move the adoption of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion made and probably second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same. And that motion carries. All right, Mr. Ashcraft, is there anything we can take earlier?
Ms. Fincham, can you do item 4?
Oh, text amendment.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I've brought back item number 4, which is proposed TXT 07-2009. This has been on the board's agenda several times and has been carried over, and it's been about 2 months. And I just brought it back to refresh the board. This relates to accepting proffers once a public hearing has been started, subject to certain standards set forth in the state code. The board had asked us to look at some options related to funding exemptions for Board of Supervisors sponsored rezoning applications, which we included in our memorandum last time. And when we left it, the board wanted to take a look at this a little bit more and digest it a little bit more. And we've simply brought this back to seek further direction from the board as to whether you even want to go forward with this amendment or whether you, don't think we should go forward at this time. It has been pending for a number of months before the board now, and we just wanted to refresh the board's memory and see what you wanted to do.
Okay, questions of Mr. Fincham on the proposal tonight, first reading?
Mr. Chairman,
Anyone?
I do have a question, and refresh my memory, Mr. Fincham, if you would. I know that was a reason we had this looked at. Is that the request of the board to really look at this process? And that was something that triggered that.
Yes, sir. About a year ago, if you remember, we were looking at some economic incentives for the economic relief for the construction
Yes.
industry, and we were looking at our when we collected our rates, as well as any other options that might, help reduce cost at a time when cost was an important factor. We looked at a number of issues. This was one of the items that the General Assembly set forth, that with the idea that time is money, rezoning requests sometimes tend to be fairly lengthy. Proffer amendments can be either major or minor, and under our current ordinance, any proffer amendment, regardless, it could be to change a siding from vinyl to hardy plank or something like that, technically has to go through the public hearing process. And that was really the genesis of this proposal, from over a year ago. Planning Commission looked at this. I think they felt that procedurally it might be somewhat difficult to try, there was another companion amendment, if you remember, to this, that the Planning Commission had also recommended that not go forward. So
I know we looked at, in that venue, we looked at the water and sewer, the payment of the water and sewer availability fees as to when they would be paid, whether up front or later in the process, and we did approve that.
yes, sir, that's been approved.
And so that's been approved. I don't know that there's a big push. George, can I ask George Weaver a question?
Absolutely, Mr. Akers.
George, and I know that you're here on your dime, and I appreciate you being here. But do you remember more of, because I think we had a discussion about this, you and I did, about this as well. Do you remember anything else that?
Yes, as I recall, one of the issues that came up was during a hearing, when you're having a hearing, if, for instance, a simple change such as Mr. Fincham had mentioned, if a developer was here and stating that it would be easier for him to put up vinyl siding, or it was easier for him to put up hardy plank rather than the siding that he had specified in the proffers, that you had the opportunity, okay, to evaluate that and as a board render a decision rather than going back to a public hearing. It was more a question of expediting a decision, not changing anything drastically. If it was a major thing, if the guy wanted to build 200 units and suddenly came back and said, I want to build 4, that was a major change. This would allow the board to make minor changes in a decision when it came to the proffers, and that's what that was all about, sir.
I got you. Thanks, George. I certainly don't want, and as I said before, I don't want to make it to the point where it just becomes real easy for developers to come in here and to make changes and request changes, I should say, that are going to really impact. But if there are some things that does not majorly impact the development, does not change the flavor of the development as to what we had intended for it to do, then we may want to go to public hearing with this particular ordinance amendment to see what happens. I mean, see what we get at the public hearing. I don't know that we have to do anything once it goes to public hearing. We can either voted down or voted up.
Well, let me ask you a quick question, because this is totally different than a developer talking to us right before the public hearing and says, oh, I'm going to give you X more or X less. Even during, this would only apply when the board asked for a change, right?
Under this scenario, if you have a zoning application pending before you, could be developer-driven.
Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This would allow you to accept an amendment to the proffer once the public hearing has been started, okay?
Right, right. So that's the
Remember,
case.
we have these issues on occasion where the board asks for a change to the proffer, or a developer proposes a change to the proffer, and then we have to discuss whether that's a clarification or whether that's a substantial change to the proffer that necessitates going back to public hearing.
Right.
Because of the limitation in the ordinance that you cannot accept a proffer once the public hearing has started.
But this is saying specifically requested by the board.
This is the supplemental amendment that the board requested. If
Right.
you all requested a rezoning,
So
or
if
if
you wanna
you
do a
supported a
rezoning-
rezoning, then the additional language relates to who pays the fees. Mr. Akers had requested that we look at some options, that if it's a board-initiated rezoning, that there not be a fee charged for that rezoning application. And that's what these other amendments would do, would give you an option as to how
Yeah.
you could proceed forward and not charge.
But yeah, another fee. But this is not really what Mr. Akers just stated. This is not really an avenue for developers to come back to modify their proffers. This is really specifically for us during those proffer discussions to make changes.
Right. There was a companion zoning amendment that Mr. Akers is referring to that I think everybody felt was much more onerous, okay? That would have allowed proffer amendments under certain conditions to be considered without even having to go through the public hearing process. And the commission had a lot of concerns about that amendment and recommended that that amendment not be considered by the board, but went ahead and felt that there were some opportunities or situations where you might want to discuss changes to the proffers or accept proffers if a public hearing had started.
Okay, that's fine.
And
That was-
having
that was
said
totally
that, it's a very rare circumstance where that occurs.
Right.
I mean, we're not, you might be addressing one zoning case every 18 to 24 months where this is really an issue.
Go to public hearing.
Yeah, I don't have it.
Okay, looks like it's the consensus of the board. We'll allow that to go to public hearing.
You gonna vote on that, Mr. Chairman? You need a motion?
We need a motion.
I'd make a motion that we send the zoning ordinance tax amendment 07-209, conditional zoning, to public hearing.
Second.
Mr. Petrum, question?
Is the August 10th meeting, or should it be September?
24th, I'd do the regular meeting. The August,
We only have one meeting.
well, then we could do September. We can't meet the August 10th deadline, so I would just do the second meeting in September.
So that date is what, September
September,
8th?
he said second meeting in September.
I don't think it's that, pressing that we need to.
Wasn't if it's,
Just
yeah.
included in the motion, and it's September 28th.
My motion will include the date of September 28th, Mr. Chairman.
And I'll second, I'll amend my second
All right.
as well.
Okay, motion been made to continue the first reading for September 28th and hold a public hearing. Motion made and proper second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?